Well, hello everybody. Sure, welcome to the 2024 Social Media Landscape Report. And it's really cool to have to do it again this year. It's really an exciting report that we put together every year, and it just gives marketers and agencies an insight of where the industry is going, where they intend to put their money, where they intend to which platforms they intend to use on the social media landscape in the social media space. And the reason why World Wide Worx and Ornico got together around this is that there's no real South African study on the numbers. You know, what are the numbers around the different platforms? So we thought that we'd do this and kind of look at it and see and give the brands those kind of insights. So yeah, so let me quickly talk about our panelists. Unfortunately, Pumzile couldn't make it. She just let me know 15 minutes ago that unfortunately she couldn't be with us. But we've still got an incredible panel. Khensani, I'm sure you all know Khensani. She's a marketing exec for Nedbank Corporate Affairs. She spent 20 years at Unilever, Diageo, and SA Breweries, and she's an award. She's won awards at Lurie's in the marketing leadership and innovation, and the most admired marketer in South Africa. So, Khensani, welcome. It's really cool to have you. Andrea, who I've known for many years, and we've worked together for many years around some data. And she's been a contributor to the Social Media Landscape Report for a number of years now, and she brings her research insights and the knowledge of brands as well as consumers. And I think we really understand those consumers. And Haydn, also, we've known each other. We've been panelists on a couple of awards together, and he's Chief Growth Officer. And he's here with me in Athens, believe it or not.
Believe it or not, around the corner from each other, and we didn't even know.
Exactly. I think what's really cool is done a BA in psychology. If I ever have my life again, I'm not going to do accounting. I'm going to do psychology. I think that's really cool. But also a postgrad diploma in advertising, and is also a chartered marketer. So guys, absolutely welcome, and it's really cool to have you all on board. Let's quickly just talk about the study. We had 137 respondents. 43% of those respondents came from brands, as opposed to last year, who was 22% of the respondents were from brands. The rest of it was from agencies, research companies, and 71% were either senior or director level. So really, what's really cool is those insights came from decision makers at the end of the day. So that's really great insights. So guys, so rather than listening to me, let's get to Arthur to really show us and go deep into the research that we've done and give everybody those insights of the survey. So Arthur, 15-20 minutes over to you before we get into the study. So go for it.
Thank you, Oresti. Welcome, everyone. If it's the last Friday of June, it's ZA Social Friday, or the Social Media Landscape Friday. And I can already feel the excitement coming from the chat room. I hope we can live up to that excitement. It's up to the social media platforms to really get you excited. But let's see if there is some data that we can all be excited about. We're always excited about the release of a new research report, and particularly the South African Social Media Landscape Report. It's been going now for more than 12 years, and we've been working with Ornico on it for at least 10 years. So there's tremendous legacy built into this project and deep understanding, which we hope we'll be able to share with you during the panel discussion and the Q&A. But right now, it's all about the data. As soon as I can find the data.
Arthur, should I do a little bit of a sing and dance while you're looking for the data?
Please do.
Okay, so
We need an ad break.
exactly. And we normally on these digital platforms, you've got to keep it short, keep attention going. But maybe we'll have to just keep it a little bit longer. So I know Arthur's going to talk about where platforms are most active on, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe I should just give a quick overview of some of the insights that we got from Ask Africa TGI. Some of the stuff that I found really, really interesting and kind of differentiated between brands and where they want to be on, and actually where the consumers are on. And also, actually, the data intrigued me because I specifically around Facebook, I thought people were leaving Facebook in their droves. But when you're looking at the users between 23 and 22, I mean, there wasn't too much of a drop. It was from 59.6. In fact, sorry, 22 was 56.7, 23 was 59.6 in terms of usage of Facebook, and I found that was really interesting because wow. And even looking at the demographics, looking at 15 to 24-year-olds, there was a high percentage of them. I thought the younger people were really leaving Facebook and moving to Insta and TikTok and some of those other platforms. Obviously, TikTok has increased from 30% to 34% in terms of users. Instagram has dropped slightly, 27 to 26. X has dropped dramatically from 22 to 19. Arthur will talk about that. But even highly active users on Facebook, there was a slight increase, which I really found interesting. So brands need to be where the consumers ultimately are, and I get it. I mean, I think consumers, there's also the platforms and how they've changed their algorithms, and specifically, Arthur will talk a lot about X and what Elon has done around that, so we can understand why brands are not ultimately using it.
Maybe
Arthur?
Oresti.
Yeah, go for it, Andrea.
Maybe if I can just add something, because obviously I saw those numbers, and I always like to look at different databases to see how it explains the other. And what struck me was the highly active users in the Northwest. And I remember from our COVID research, we saw that the social capital in the Northwest was the highest. So I think seems to be an interesting link, and I'll dig into it, between social capital and social media. In other words, what I'm saying is, if you have a citizenship or a consumer base where the social capital is high, chances are that the usage of social media will be higher. And so, and in my view, Kenzie and Haydn might have a different view, but Facebook is one of the more interrelational social medias. And if you see at why it's being used. So I think there's a link between social capital, which I find very interesting, because it says there's a different meta layer to just usage of different technologies for social media.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really cool insight, Andrea. Thanks for that. Arthur, are you ready?
I will try share screen again.
Okay.
And tell me if you can see it.
Not yet. I can see it.
I'm still struggling with. I always struggle with screen share. It's an abomination.
StreamYard, yeah, I agree. Oresti, sorry, folks. It tells me StreamYard is sharing the window. So I don't know if the audience can see it. audience can't see the window. So I have no idea what to do about that. There might be a plan B. Okay, plan B is I've uploaded the slides. So let's see if that will do the trick.
There we go.
Bravo.
Okay, great.
Bravo, Arthur.
Thank you.
At least we know
Great, I
you're
see
real.
you.
You're not a fake.
Over to you, Arthur. There we go.
Thank you very much. And away we go. So first, I have to thank all our contributors to the study, and in particular, Ask Africa and TGI for the incredible data they've shared with us, but also Brandwatch and GWI, without whom obviously we cannot do this. So we start off with the survey that Oresti mentioned, the social corporation. We surveyed more than 130 of South Africa's biggest brands. And this is always the highlight of the survey because it gives us an insight into how organizations in South Africa are using social media, which ultimately has a dramatic impact on how the consumer experiences social media, how it's made relevant to them in this country, as opposed to merely absorbing what is delivered globally. So, to start with, the platform that is most heavily used by South African organizations is, of course, Facebook. That hasn't changed, but it's diminished slightly. It's gone down from 84% to 78% of major corporations using it. And that's a overall trend that we've seen for a few years now, as Facebook tends to ride roughshod over the sensibilities of its users and the companies using it as a platform. So dropping from, at one stage, being almost unanimous back in 2019, pre-COVID, 96% using it, down to 78%. LinkedIn has also dropped somewhat, not as precipitously, because it never reached quite the heights that Facebook did, but it's still the second most used platform in South Africa, followed by Instagram and then X. And X is really the story of the shift in social media in South Africa, because from at one stage being used by more than 2/3 of corporations in this country, and 68% of them using it back in 2019. In just 5 years, dropped down. Sorry, that was 70. I'm looking at the wrong column. 90% of companies were using it back in 2018, 88% in 2019, and that is dropped down to 51%. Just in the last year, dropped 12% in terms of companies using it. And that is a direct reflection of the way Elon Musk has been managing the platform, allowing it once again to become that cesspool of toxicity. And advertisers don't want to be associated with the kind of toxic content that is now being allowed on Facebook. Elon Musk personally unbanning numerous of the contributors to that toxicity. So don't be surprised to see it diminish even further. The flip side of that, I have to mention, and you may have come across this narrative elsewhere, is that the cost of advertising on X has now dropped dramatically. And the result is that smaller advertisers are moving in because they get results in terms of return on investment at that low level of investment. But the big firms, on the one hand, don't see a return on investment, but on the other hand, they see reputational damage coming from that platform. YouTube, coincidentally, is at the same level of 51% of companies using it. And you would say, well, that means they're just as bad as X, but you've got to look at it again in that long-term context. Back in COVID year 2020, they were at 50%. So you see them ebb and flow and there hasn't been a dramatic drop. They're pretty much at the same level as they were for the last 2 years. And it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in the coming year or two as they introduce more AI tools into their platform, both for creation of content and for consumption of that content. So are big brands going to leverage those AI tools on YouTube? I'm convinced they will, but it remains to be seen to what extent that happens. But we can expect a ramp up in YouTube's user base amongst the corporates in the coming year or two. And that'll be the opposite of X. So probably a migration from X to YouTube in terms of budget to some extent. The one that's jumped, and the only one that's jumped significantly from already a high level, is TikTok. Although you'll see Snap jumped by a higher percentage, that's of an incredibly low user base. But TikTok from 28% to 33% is essentially increasing its relentless rise amongst both users and advertisers. So the big brands using TikTok are not being put off by the threatened US ban on TikTok being used in that country. And now a third of South African big brands are using TikTok. That's a significant story. When we ask where you'll be active in the next 12 months if you don't use it, again, TikTok comes out number one, as it did last year. And we do see that the intention of using a platform does not translate directly into actual usage. So, for example, in the case of TikTok, where 28% said that they would start using TikTok this year, that translated into only 5% more using it. So around a fifth of those who say they will use a platform will end up using it. And therefore, all of these intentions you see there at a very similar level for most of the major platforms will result in an evening out of the ranking or the relative size of each of those platforms. So the intention to use, while bigger with TikTok, is at a very similar level as most of the other platforms, just dropping off again with X, with X. And it's interesting. There's a comment amongst the viewers. Sonette says the new policy that allows adult content will further impact advertisers who want a brand safe environment. I fully agree with that. It's been quite startling to see the extent to which TikTok allows that content. And 919 Joburg says it was accessible before it became X. Now, I fully agree with that, but it's become worse now because Elon Musk loves the approach of anything goes. And when anything goes, the advertisers also go. When it came to short video platforms, we see Reels especially winning that battle at the moment. And that's because the advertisers are investing in the platforms where they already are. TikTok, yes, it's climbing, and we have both regular TikTok stream and TikTok stories contributing to that growth. But you can see advertisers stick with what they trust. Where is social media budget going? And again, it's that same rule. Advertisers and big brands stick with what they trust. Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and X they don't trust anymore. And again, the comments that we are seeing in the chat room really do sum up what the issues are. I won't repeat it, but some great wisdom from MJ Khan about what some of those factors are. And I fully agree with all of those comments. Then who manages the social media accounts? And there we've seen a bit of a shift as well. The marketing department is less and less responsible for it. So is the social media department. In fact, the social media departments are vanishing, and not quite vanishing, but diminishing in importance in among large brands. And the PR teams are taking up the slack. So we saw a big jump in the role of the PR team in managing social media accounts. has social media brought brand returns? And when you look at that as a slice of the pie at the top, you'll see that only 8% say no. So where are they seeing brand returns? And it's brand awareness that wins. It's dropped slightly from last year, but still significantly up from prior years. And brand awareness is the real holy grail of social media for the big brands. And you can see sales is far behind that, but up from last year. And in fact, it's at the highest level that it's been for some years, with more than half the brands now using social platforms as a sales vehicle. And then in terms of live event platforms, again, they're going with what they know: Facebook Live, Instagram Live. TikTok is in there and has overtaken Twitter, but still far behind the ones that the brands know. And this really sums up an argument that I've made for some years now when we present these findings, is that the brands, the big brands, tend to use those social media platforms where their own people are active. So when their own people tend to be older or have an older profile, and therefore tend to use those platforms that are typically more used by older people, then that translates into where the brands also place most of their budget. It's not a hard and fast rule, because obviously you see people investing in other platforms as well. But generally speaking, it's what results in certain brands remaining high in terms of budget and activity. And then when we come to programmatic advertising, which was the predecessor to, you could say, machine learning and AI in social media campaigns, and there we see a big jump from 42% to 49% of companies saying that they're using programmatic advertising. So half of the big brands are using these more advanced tools. And then when you ask if it's improved their ROI, you can see the precise reason why there's such an increase in the use of programmatic advertising, because the proportion of those using it who say it's improved ROI has jumped from 60% to 68%. What's concerning is that the proportion of those who are unsure remains quite high at 29%. And that points to a gap in the usage of these tools and the ability to measure these tools, or the impact of these tools. And this, of course, is one of my favorite questions always. Are you spending more on new technology for marketing purposes? And this was really dramatic in terms of the proportion spending more. It went from 38% to 63%. And it's now overtaken the high that it was at in 2021. During the COVID period, we saw a ramping up of investment in technology for marketing. That dropped back once lockdowns ended and the like. But then we saw it rising again, and now it's risen to a massive new high. 2/3 almost of big brands allocating budget towards new technology. And that we'll see translating into investment in AI tools in particular for marketing purposes. And this just emphasizes that particular finding, and that is where that budget is going. And the number one is AI tools. Firstly, search and chat bots among 47% of respondents, and then AI in general is also a massive uptake amongst the major brands in South Africa. So this slide in particular highlights the extent to which AI is going to shift marketing in social media, but also beyond social media. Just to emphasize quickly, the full report will be available. I believe it is ready. And all of this is in the full report that you can peruse the additional numbers at your leisure. Now we come to the social consumer, looking at lifestyle versus work style, essentially. And here, just to emphasize the methodology and the partnership with Ask Afrika, thanks to Andrea's stewarding of the data, the TGI survey that Ask Afrika conducts among 24,000 respondents, representing more than 28 million South Africans. So the data that I'm going to share with you now comes from that research. Bear in mind that this research is conducted over a lengthy period, so 2024 data is not yet ready. So this reflects what happened last year. And just to show you the comparisons, in 2022, 56% of South African adults living in cities and towns were using Facebook, and that has gone up to 60% in 2023. TikTok, also a nice, healthy jump from 30.6% to 34%. So interesting that both Facebook and TikTok have jumped in usage. And Instagram, meanwhile, has remained completely static at 27%, while X has dropped from 22% to 19%. So you can start seeing the impact of that toxicity and the adult orientation of X on the user base. LinkedIn surprised us with that drop from 14.7% to 12%. We're not quite sure what the reason for that is. It's not dramatic. It's not as big as the drop in X usage, but it could partly be explained by the increased usage of Facebook and TikTok. These working people are clearly spending far too much time scrolling through their TikToks. Let's break it down now in terms of age firstly, and you can see there's still a strong correlation between age and usage of Facebook, and also age and highly active usage of Facebook. So users is the overall users over the past year, and highly active users are those who've used it in the last 7 days. And you'll see that for Facebook, there's not much difference between the two. There's the biggest gap is around 7% between in the 35 to 44 age group and the 45 to 64 age group. And that's a very small gap between general users and highly active users. And this tells us that Facebook is very much part of South Africans' lifestyles. And it also helps explain why the brands stick to Facebook, because they know it, but also their customers know it and seem to trust it despite everything that Mark Zuckerberg is doing. When we look at Facebook usage by income, that just emphasizes the point that it's part of South Africans' lifestyles. As apart from the highest income group, we see a fairly stable usage of Facebook across all income levels. Those in less than 1,000 Rand, 59% using it, 55% highly actively. And when we go right up to the 14 to 18,000 Rand level, that goes to 64% and 59%. Not a big difference. So you could almost say that Facebook has become a standardized social platform for all incomes, even though it diminishes by age. TikTok, a very different stories, a very strong correlation between age and usage. It's an indirect correlation, i.e. the younger you are, the more likely you are to be using TikTok. And here there's a bigger gap between users and highly active users. So not yet part of people's lifestyles as such. But when you look at the youngest age groups, it's interesting to see that 38% are highly active users. So well over a third of people in that age group. Interesting that when people turn 65, they're far less likely to use it. There's a precipitous drop from the previous age group, from 23% down to 8%, but the highly active users even lower, from 15% down to 2%. That's all the grannies and grandpas that are creating TikToks to impress their grandchildren and to try and remain cool. Then when it comes to income, there's a fairly direct correlation between income and level of usage. And it's really interesting that the highest income group, 51% of those earning more than 18,000 Rand a month are using TikTok. That's more than half. It does drop off significantly in terms of highly active use. You're far too busy earning that income to be able to use TikTok too aggressively. But interestingly, even those earning no income whatsoever are fairly active. 21%, 1 in 5 people in that age group using TikTok, although it halves when it comes to highly active use of TikTok. Instagram, similar profile as TikTok, interestingly, although not a big difference between the 15 to 24 and the 25 to 34 year age groups. Now that's a fact of Instagram having been around for a while, and the younger users who were the initial Instagram users becoming older now over the last 5 to 8 years or so, moving up the age group, and therefore almost normalizing Instagram up to the age of around 34. And then it drops off quite sharply. Still more heavily used than TikTok in those older age groups, but certainly perceived as a young person's environment. Same with regard to income, a strong correlation between income and usage of Instagram, very similar to the TikTok income profile of usage. So income has a direct impact on these two platforms, Instagram and TikTok, and a very similar impact as well. Then we come to X, marking the spot where people go and do unspeakable things to each other, and speakable things, of course. But interestingly, the age profile is very similar in the first 3 age groups. So up to the age of 44, between 21% and 24% use it, and between 12 and 15% use it very actively. That's exceptionally low, though, compared to the other platforms. And when you see it dropping off with age to the extent that it does after age 65, where its usage is even lower than on Instagram, you can see that X is facing long-term disaster. There's, again, a direct correlation between income and usage of X, also with highly active users of X. And then LinkedIn is a different animal altogether. The age profile is different. There isn't a correlation between age and usage, but where one can see a clear pattern is people who are entering their careers or rising up in their careers are far more likely to be using LinkedIn. And that's the 25 to 34 year age group. It drops off significantly after 34 years, both in terms of general usage and active usage. But what's interesting is that after that age, it remains fairly stable. So users between 8 and 10% in all 3 of those large age groups, and highly active users, 4 to 7% in all 3 of those age groups. So it represents both an opportunity and a challenge to LinkedIn, but also shows you what kind of advertisers would be targeting LinkedIn at this stage. And that's those who are aiming at a young up-and-coming professional or working person. Personal income, not surprising on LinkedIn that there's a strong correlation, especially at the higher end. And here you can see where LinkedIn's sweet spot lies. It's with the higher earners, especially those earning over 18,000 Rand, with 1/3 of them using the platform and 1/5 of them using it highly actively. it's this one raises the interesting question of correlation versus causation. Does using LinkedIn allow you to increase your income, or does increasing your income then lead you to LinkedIn? I suspect it's a bit of both. Finally, we come to my favorite topic of the moment. If you want a book on the topic, I can recommend one to you. But let's look at what our report says about AI in the social media environment. And this is from data collected by and Brandwatch between the beginning of January and the end of March this year, looking at mentions of AI in social media. And they counted a total of close to 1 million mentions, with around 376,000 people actually talking about AI in South Africa in social media. And most of that was general AI discussions, 84% talking about AI in general, only 8% talking about large language models, and 7% getting hung up on the creative side of it. More interesting is the word cloud around AI in all of these discussions. And the phrase AI, of course, dominates. But what's interesting here is that the full term artificial intelligence is at the same level as ChatGPT. You could argue that ChatGPT, in fact, is more talked about, slightly bigger than artificial intelligence and machine learning, for that matter. But this shows that ChatGPT has driven the conversation around AI more than any other platform, certainly this year. And then the last slide I'm going to share with you is the most fun one of all, which shows the most commonly used emojis around AI. And this is the same as a year ago in terms of the most commonly used emoji, which was the thread. Those of you who attended last year's event will remember that the thread, in fact, defined AI conversations, because the majority of AI content on social media, especially on X, was threads that told you how to use AI, or that gave examples of AI in lengthy threads. That's one area where X has stood out, and that has been in providing superb resources for people who want to understand where AI is going. It led me to some of my most valuable sources of regular information on AI. What's interesting here also is that the two of the most commonly used emojis, aside from threads, are the laughing face and the crying face. And that does sum up a lot of people's feelings about AI. They don't know whether they should laugh or cry. The smiling robot alongside is at the same level. So the robots will help you decide whether you should laugh or cry. But next to the laughing face is also the mind blown emoji. And I think many of us really associate most new AI tools, announcements, and breakthroughs with that mind blown emoji, as well as the flames, because it is so exciting to see what AI is doing and going to do. Of course, scary as well. That's why you see a lot of scary emojis. But I think the overall sense of this is one of people being amazed by AI, even in the toxic environment of some of these social media platforms. And with that, thank you very much.
Cool, Arthur. Thanks for those insights. And as Arthur said, it's you can download it. I know we've put it onto the group. Just a couple of things before getting to the panel, Arthur. One interesting comment from Lebogang is that brands stick to the platforms that they're used to, but also because there's more users there, there's absolutely no doubt. And Faye mentions 60% Facebook users. Interesting. I find the same thing. But that was what Andrea was actually talking about just earlier. Arthur, just a question from Mac. Why is YouTube not part of the set? It actually is, but yeah, do you want to just elaborate why we weren't giving more explanations? I think YouTube is their Mac Home Care. It's just not one of the top 4 platforms. Arthur concentrates on the top 4 or 5 platforms at the end of the day, but it definitely is there at the end of the day.
Yeah, YouTube is used by 51% of the major brands. It's the same level as X, but the reality is that there's such a dramatic trend in X's decline that merited further exploration.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a question here. How does South Africa compare with the international trends in social media usage, especially Facebook? Would you know, Arthur?
Not especially, but we are bigger fans of Facebook than many of the more developed markets. So I would say that we are remaining faithful to Facebook for now. But if we do follow international markets, we will see a decline in its usage.
Yep. Great, guys. Thank you. If there's any other questions from the viewers, if you can just put it into the chat, and I'll ask all the panelists around that. So,
there's a very significant question, which is what book on AI they should get. What do you recommend, Oresti?
I was going to ask that right at the end, Arthur. When there's Arthur's written an incredible book, the Hitchhiker's Guide to I can't remember the exact title, but Hitchhiker's Guide to AI. It's an amazing book. Yeah, it is a really, really good book. But I think what's really cool about it, guys, is that it actually talks about how much AI is in South Africa, but also Africa as a whole, the rest of Africa. And Arthur's written some really, really nice scenarios around a lot of that AI. So let's get to around to the panelists. Khensani, I think here's a really interesting one from our perspective, and you've been representing one of the major brands in South Africa. If you're looking at the research, it talks about in the next 12 months, are you intending to delete your social media accounts? And in the previous years, I mean, in 2022, only 6% intended deleting their accounts. 23 was 8%. But in 24, it rose up to 20%, which I really found interesting. And I actually would have thought most of it would have been X. But out of that 20%, 19% that they were going to delete Facebook, 30% X, and 33% Insta. And I find that really, really interesting. Would you, from a brand perspective, really explain why you would be doing that from a brand perspective?
That's really surprising to me, to be honest. We're certainly not one of the brands that's looking to delete any of the social media platforms, and we use quite an array of them for different reasons, by the way. I think it's more around, and that's why I say for different reasons. So when we look at our X engagement, it's very much on our Youth X platform, and it's really around how do we make sure, because Nedbank is not really seen as cool, so how do we make sure financial advice and financial content and all of that is done in a much more interesting, cool manner in TikTok. But if you look at what we do on Instagram, it's more around the content around like our properties, our ads, for example. Whereas on X, and whilst I see like a lot of the brands leaving X, we actually look at X, and we always have to have this at the back of our heads that there's a lot of bots and it's not always, like the right thing. But we use X actually as a lead indicator of the conversation around our brand. And so even if you ask us, what do we measure? We of course, we measure the number of followers and stuff, but it's not that important. We actually measure more the sentiment of the conversation. because it helps us understand. And we've actually seen a really good correlation, if you look at the marketing funnel, between the sentiment of the brand and consideration. So would I consider the brand in the future? And we've done a lot of work to see that correlation. So for me, I just think as long as a brand, you are clear what you're using that platform for, you understand your own brand guidelines, and what you will or will not get involved in a conversation. I can't see leaving those platforms as the right thing to do. And maybe I'll end off by saying, I mean, I know, like, I just have two conversations that happened on X, pretty recently, that we choose as a brand not to engage in, and that's important. Like, so I think maybe brands decide, oh, I'm just going to jump on this because someone's talking about it. So when people speak about white monopoly capital, it doesn't matter what Nedbank says as a brand. That is a conversation that's going to be there. And when we've looked at it, we've seen that a lot of it comes from bots. It's not like, so why would we put ourselves in that conversation? We're very clear what type of brand we are. We've got a very clear purpose of using our financial expertise to do good. So to continue to engage on that level of conversation doesn't actually help us. So we choose some conversations we just say we're not going to be involved in. And another one, when I read the report around misinformation, for example, and it feels like a small thing. We had a campaign on Roblox where we had DJ Zinhle and her daughter Cairo as the lead on the campaign. And on X, there was a massive influencer who basically said the reason Cairo got the campaign from Nedbank was because he called our CEO Mike Brown and got Cairo the job, which is a complete lie, right? Like, so, and like, oh, you did so well. We looked at that conversation and we were like, it doesn't help us. Let's just, so we left it. And I think that's the other bit on brands is, for me, don't just completely walk away. I think choose like when to engage, and choose when to just step away from it. So I certainly believe that in different ways, these platforms still will play a role for our brand.
Yeah. Great, Khensani. I think that's really interesting because I think you're right. Brand objectives, and I am finding in the last couple of years, there's no doubt that the business objectives and the brand objectives aligning, and the importance of that alignment, and the culture and the personality of the brand becomes absolutely critical around what you're doing, how you communicate it, etc. Haydn, from your perspective, because you look at it from an EMEA perspective, but also a much more global perspective currently, the question that I asked Arthur earlier around South African trends as opposed to the global trends, do you have, from your perspective, more insights around what's happening around the global trends?
Yeah, I think not a day goes by that we don't have the generative AI conversation everywhere. Brands, agency, content, customer service, commerce, everywhere in the entire agenda, it's there, right? So it's an existential threat to us as an agency. I think what's really been interesting, and I think sometimes, I still almost chuckle when people use these generative tools as a search engine, because people haven't really fully grasped yet the power that's in your hands. And I think, we've had predictive analytics, we've had various forms of data that were informing us about stuff we did in the past. The interesting thing here now is that it's actually taking that data and generating new stuff, which is the generative part of it. So it's coming up and creating, which basically, Arthur, you in the research there, when people are talking, you see 7% of people talking about creativity. And I guess that entire 70% is probably the ad industry sitting there going, where are we? And where does creativity fit into this? And David Roger at Cannes had a chat with the OpenAI CTO, and they were talking about job losses and where it's going and where the shift's going to go. Now, the party line at the moment around the world is that we're going to be able to spend more time doing the human parts of it. And she was arguing that most of the jobs that are going to be lost are probably the jobs that shouldn't have been there in the first place. So it's very operational, executional jobs, the management of time. I mean, I was looking at an agency retainer the other day. If 20% of the people on that retainer are doing the thinking, it's a lot. There's a lot of doers and management and traffic and operations and account management. Once all of that goes, we're left with a few people. Now, it's interesting because the conversation then goes to, where's that going to shift to? Is it going to go into clients? Are we going to merge clients and agencies? You know, so there's this. I think when we look at this research moving forward, I think we're all just trying to get our heads around where it is and where it's going. I think the content creation. I mean, we're seeing reductions in time of up to 80%. I mean, we're doing it. We've got thousands of use cases already, and I think that's been the interesting thing for me. We're no longer talking about hype. Clients want practical use cases. Where has this actually worked and what have you done? And where are you on this journey? So when we look at that, that's what's dominating conversation. And it's no different in South Africa. I think this is one of those things, you know, we typically behind on the curve sometimes, we're catching up with some trends, or, you know, we might have slight differences. But the impact it's going to have is going to be systemic and existential for us as a marketing and communications industry, and particularly from the ad side. And I think for marketers too, I think Gartner predicted something like 75% of all operational tasks in marketers' worlds are going to be eliminated in the next 2 to 3 years, which then says you can't have a brand manager that's managing a process and an agency. They're going to have to be thinking, they're going to have to be creating content. They've now got the tools to do it themselves. If we put Adobe Firefly, or if you're using ChatGPT or Midjourney or any of these amazing tools, which not only help you create, they help you manage, administer, deliver, track, test. So you're going to have this total change in operating model and the way we work. And I think it's a good thing that it's happening across the world, and South Africa is no different. So we've got some ideas of where it's going to go, but I think it's universal.
I mean, there was an interesting. I'll get to you now. Yes, Kenzie.
No, I'd love to add like a practical thing we've done at Nedbank, right? When it comes to the space in marketing, and when all of this Gen AI thing was coming out, I mean, my PR team was, oh my God, we're going to lose our jobs. My agencies, it was just like a lot of drama around it. And so the first thing we did is we took 2 campaigns that were already in market, and we said, what if we'd used Gen AI to create these campaigns? What would have happened? So we took it through the process. We then compared the output of those 2 campaigns with what was actually like what the agency had worked on. And on one campaign, we realized, we wouldn't have gone with this one. But on the one campaign, we were like, oh shit, actually, we would have gone with this campaign and stuff. And then also what we learned was the amount of time we would have spent on different areas, right? On strategy, quickly, like actually, to be honest, like on other things, we realized actually on the creativity, you still needed to teach the tool a lot about, you know, your brand guidelines, your brand purpose, all of that and stuff. But it actually still took us from creating a campaign in 3 months to 14 days. And so already that started getting me excited, at least, right? I'm going, I mean, this is, you know, incredible. Then what we did is in the bank itself, I mean, obviously we're a bank, there's a lot of risk and compliance things that sit around us. So from group technology, the sort of tools we can use was, you must use, I mean, I'm not going to mention the names of the brands and stuff, but these are the tools we use as Nedbank. So Kenzie, you use these tools. And we took the tools we'd used for the 2 campaigns, and we took the tools that group technology had recommended to us, and we said, okay, group technology, let's use your tools. And we compared again, and we found that the tools that the bank wanted us to use were actually inferior in terms of output to the ones that we wanted to use. And again, and I always say this to marketers, all of these things need to be in your hands and in your control. Like, so, and the only way for you to say to GT, I'm not going to do this, is to actually show them the output and stuff. So then group technology then said to us, okay, we actually get the why you want to do this in the use case. So for now, continue to use this. The guys that we want you to work with, we're going to have to work with them to make sure that they get to a level where they can give you that level of output and stuff. So we've got 2 campaigns live in market right now that were done through Gen AI, but we still needed human beings to be able to, one, put the brief, right? Because like what, and when I say the brief, whatever the prompts are and all of that, we still needed human beings to be able to say, is this right for the brand? Does it make sense and stuff for the brand? And all the approvals and stuff that, in there. So for me, I'm incredibly excited about the space and what it can do for us in terms of managing our budget, I think, really efficiently. But what I can tell you is if I look at in the last month, just 2 campaigns that we've had, which is, I don't know if anyone has seen them, the Bank Your Time campaign, which was around, time is more valuable than money, but also the June 16 campaign, where we were basically honoring, the heroes of the young lives who died in June 16. I'm not entirely sure, Haydn, and I'd be interested to hear what you think, if Gen AI could have come up with campaigns like that. So I'm still in the camp that says my big brand campaigns, I still need the level of creative thinking that, and maybe Gen AI will get there. I'm not entirely sure. Right now, I'm not there. But on my campaigns, which are really around driving digital sales, being quick turnarounds, all of that, I'm very excited about where I am. And then I think what it's going to do, to Haydn's point, is actually release the team to focus on, I think, like the things that, that are, I think, much more strategically important. So I just wanted to give a practical example of the journey that we're going through as a brand.
I think that's incredible, Kenzie, and I think thanks for that, because it gives practical examples to our viewers out there, which is important. I mean, even at the Cannes now, Manolo Arroyo from the CMO of Coca-Cola also, I mean, they've been working with OpenAI since 2019, believe it or not. And his takeout quote from me, he says, "I have no doubt that AI is going to reshape professional marketing as we know it." Exactly what you said, Haydn, and we'll change it. But I think it's, not everybody's going to lose their jobs. There's no doubt. As you said, Kenzie, you need the human element around that.
I cannot believe that. Add quickly just on that. There is no doubt that we're going to have to keep the human interaction. I think our problem at the moment is that our business models are not baked on the thinkers. It's baked on the doers. So what you're going to find is maybe a contraction to boutique conceptual houses, and the big agency with 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people doing stuff, creating masses and masses of content that we spew onto the internet all day. That part is going to disappear. So I think that's where and then the same thing will happen in marketing departments. So you're probably going to, I mean, we're seeing 300-400% output in volume and up to a 70% reduction in time. So we're going to be using less time to generate more, but we're still going to need that. But they have now, Kenzie, in terms of the stuff like humor and irony and sarcasm and wit, the kind of things that make us human, they're starting to break that level now. They're starting to write comedy shows and sitcoms, and these things are generating very funny stuff and then shooting it in real time. So I think it's a matter of time before it gets there, but it will never eliminate us. But it's going to reduce a lot, and that's why they're suggesting the kind of universal basic income, because there's going to be a few people that's going to make a lot of money and a lot of people that won't have jobs. So we need, or we'll have to rethink what they do. So we're going to have to face that. Sorry.
Just quickly, because I cannot believe how much the time goes so quickly. In fact, I think we should look at doing this 1.5 hours and not an hour in the future. But quickly, Andrea, you were just before Arthur got talking about the results. You were talking about the social capital and the usage around quite a lot of this, because I mean, when you're looking at the age groups and the usage of these platforms, that's where the consumers ultimately are. But it looks like the brands are not correlating, which is unusual, because the brands are looking at where the consumers are, and that's where they would actually spend their time and money. And yes, they are. There's no doubt they are spending it on Facebook, but it has diminished dramatically. Why is that?
Well, I think sometimes traditional brands forget that they are moral agents. And it's something which consumers, according to research, are, if not overtly, certainly covertly aware of. So the way consumers look at brands and influencers, they expect brands and influencers to uphold these ethics of autonomy, community, divinity. And that's why I believe, Arthur, Twitter, X, is plummeting, because one knows that, you know, you're a moral agent when you have voluntary actions, you're aware of the consequences, and you participate in interpersonal relationships, like in fact X is. And Elon Musk is seen to, even by not controlling his platform, that's also a type of control. And consumers step away when there's perceived to be too much control. And I think X is a classic case study of that. So in short, I know we're running out of time, Oresti. That's what I would say. It would just be a reminder to brands and platforms to know that they're moral agents.
Yeah, guys, geez, I cannot believe it. I mean, wow, this time is gone. There's so many more questions I wanted to ask you guys, but Kenzie, Haydn, Andrea, absolutely, thank you so much. You've given. I'm looking at the comments. Everybody's loving, really loving your insights. We didn't even get, and one of the things I was really excited about was really just to talk about deep fakes, and that, because that's really our theme for this year, and I did quite a lot of research around it, and we haven't even got into that. But thank you, guys. But also, Arthur, thank you very much for always being our partner, but also TGI for giving us that incredible data that we can actually correlate between what's happening. But as well, for giving us some really great content, and to all of you for completing the survey and helping the brands and agencies in giving them more insights of what you all intend doing going into the future. So, and to everybody who's attended this webinar. But I think Arthur and I will have a great marketing team, a great discussion around, should we increase it from an hour session to an hour and a half, because I think time goes, before we know it, it's all gone, and we haven't really got into the nub of it. We were just getting into those really juicy bits. So, but guys, thank you very much. Thank you everybody for attending it, and thanks to the panel again.